What if I told you that Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister who won a landslide election just months ago, could be kicked out of Parliament entirely at the next election? And the man leading the charge against him, Jeremy Corbyn. Labour insiders are now saying the unthinkable. It's not inconceivable that Starmer could lose his own seat. This is the story of how a Prime Minister who seemed untouchable is now facing political extinction in his own constituency. And trust me, when you hear what Labour insiders are saying behind closed doors, you'll understand why panic is setting in at the highest levels of government. Let's start with just how extraordinary this situation is. According to Labour insiders speaking to the New Statesman, Keir Starmer could lose his Holborn and St Pancras seat to a left-wing candidate backed by Jeremy Corbyn. But it gets worse. He's not alone. Health Secretary Wes Streeting and Justice Secretary Shabana Mahmood are also under threat from independent candidates or candidates from a new party set to be led by Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana, the left-wing MP who dramatically quit Labour earlier this month. One senior Labour figure didn't mince words. It is not inconceivable that Keir, Wes and Shabana could all lose their seats. Think about that. We're talking about the Prime Minister and two of his most senior cabinet ministers potentially being wiped out by their own former party colleagues. The same insider warned that Labour faces a worst-of-all-worlds scenario at the next election, coming under attack from both left-wing alternatives and Reform UK. That's political annihilation from both flanks. So, what's driving this political earthquake? The answer is complex, but Gaza is at the centre of it all. Andrew Feinstein, a pro-Gaza independent candidate, already came second in Starmer's constituency in the last election. Yes, Starmer won with a comfortable majority of 11,572 votes. But here's the crucial detail. That was before the recent disturbing images from Gaza made the war an even bigger issue for Israel's critics. The political landscape has shifted dramatically. Anger over Gaza is now driving massive support for left-wing alternatives to Labour, particularly in constituencies with large Muslim populations and student voters. Exactly the demographics that make up Starmer's Holborn and St Pancras seat. But here's where it gets really dangerous for Starmer. The real threat comes if left-wing independent candidates, the Green Party and Corbyn's new party either join forces or come to an agreement not to stand against each other in winnable seats. That's not just vote splitting, that's strategic coordination designed to take down Labour incumbents. And this week, Starmer tried to get ahead of the Gaza issue with a dramatic announcement. He declared that the UK could recognise Palestinian statehood in September, but only if Israel meets 4 conditions: allow more aid into Gaza, stop annexing West Bank land, agree to a ceasefire, and sign up to a long-term peace process.
The appalling scenes in Gaza are unrelenting. And I know the British people are sickened by what is happening. The images of starvation and desperation are utterly horrifying. The denial of aid to children and to babies is completely unjustifiable, just as the continued captivity of hostages is completely unjustifiable. Hundreds of civilians have been killed while seeking aid, children killed whilst collecting water. It is a humanitarian catastrophe, and it must end. We've put millions of pounds of aid into Gaza. We've announced an extra 40 million this year. But that help is not getting in. So we're scaling up our work. We are accelerating efforts to evacuate children from Gaza who need critical medical assistance, bringing them to the UK for specialist medical treatment. News that Israel will allow countries to airdrop aid into Gaza has come far too late. But we will do everything we can to get aid in via this route. We are already working urgently with the Jordanian authorities to get British aid onto planes and into Gaza. More broadly, alongside our closest allies, I am working on a pathway to peace in the region, focused on the practical solutions that will make a real difference to the lives of those who are suffering in this war. That pathway will set out concrete steps to turn the desperately needed ceasefire into a lasting peace. Recognition of a Palestinian state has to be one of those steps. I'm unequivocal about that. But it must be part of a wider plan which ultimately results in a two-state solution and lasting security for Palestinians and Israelis. That is the way to ensure that recognition is a tool of maximum impact to improve the lives of those who are suffering. And that must always be our ultimate goal. The fact that we've rebuilt the UK's standing on the world stage enables us to rally international action behind real, purposeful, practical solutions. That is what we've done with the Coalition of the Willing in support of Ukraine. And that is what must happen in the Middle East, building a new international coalition behind a plan to end the suffering, now and for the long term.
Netanyahu's response was swift and brutal. He claimed Starmer's move rewards Hamas's monstrous terrorism. But here's what's really interesting. This wasn't just foreign policy, this was domestic damage control. Starmer had been coming under massive pressure from his own MPs to recognise Palestinian statehood. Last week, more than 250 cross-party members signed a letter calling on him to act. Among them was Dame Emily Thornberry, a Labour MP and chairwoman of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. The timing of this announcement, right after an emergency cabinet meeting, screams of panic management. Transport Secretary Heidi Alexander was put out to defend the policy, insisting this wasn't gesture politics, and that Starmer hadn't changed his mind under pressure from backbenchers. But let's be honest, when you're giving ultimatums with 8-week deadlines, that's exactly what it looks like. Starmer is trying to outflank his left-wing critics before they can use Gaza as a weapon against him in his own constituency. But Gaza isn't the only issue threatening Starmer's political survival. There's a pattern of policy disasters that's alienating his core support base. Take the disability benefits fiasco. Starmer's government announced plans to remove benefits from some people with disabilities, a move so unpopular it had to be abandoned in what can only be described as an embarrassing U-turn. That's exactly the kind of policy that reinforces the narrative that Starmer has abandoned Labour's traditional values. And here's the deeper problem that experts are identifying. There's a general feeling among voters in big cities that Labour has taken them for granted for too long. These are the urban, progressive voters who should be Starmer's natural supporters. If he's losing them, he's in serious trouble. Think about the political mathematics here. Starmer's constituency is in London, full of exactly the kind of voters who care deeply about Gaza, disability rights, and progressive politics. If Corbyn can mobilise these voters behind a left-wing alternative, Starmer's 11,572 vote majority could evaporate. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room, Jeremy Corbyn's political resurrection. This is the man Starmer systematically destroyed, expelled from Labour, and wrote off as a political has-been. But Corbyn never went away, and his supporters never forgave Starmer for what they see as betrayal. Zara Sultana's dramatic departure from Labour earlier this month wasn't just a personal decision, it was a political statement. She's joining forces with Corbyn to create a new left-wing party that could potentially split the progressive vote in key constituencies. The beauty of this strategy, from Corbyn's perspective, is that it's not about winning a general election. It's about destroying Starmer personally. Taking down a sitting Prime Minister in his own constituency would be the ultimate revenge for everything Starmer did to the Labour left. And the timing couldn't be better for Corbyn. Starmer's approval ratings are in freefall, policy U-turns are making him look weak, and international crises are exposing the contradictions in his foreign policy approach. So, where does this leave us? We're potentially looking at one of the most extraordinary political comebacks in British history. Jeremy Corbyn, written off as finished, could deliver the ultimate blow to the man who destroyed his leadership by taking away Starmer's own seat in Parliament. The warning from Labour insiders is clear. This isn't just possible, it's plausible. When senior figures in your own party are saying it's not inconceivable that you could lose your seat, that's not spin, that's panic. Starmer's desperate Gaza announcement this week shows he knows the threat is real. But policy U-turns and last-minute gestures might not be enough to save him from the perfect storm brewing in his own constituency. The next election could deliver the most shocking result in modern British politics. A sitting Prime Minister losing his seat to the very man he expelled from his party. If that happens, it won't just be Starmer's career that's over, it'll be one of the greatest political revenge stories ever told. What do you think? Could Corbyn really pull off this political masterpiece, or is Starmer safe in his seat? Let me know in the comments below. If you found this analysis eye-opening, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Because with stakes this high and politics this volatile, there's going to be a lot more drama to cover in the coming months. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.